Hi everybody. This week I'm going to talk about part-of-speech tagging. So if you recall what we've been going through so far, on week 8 and week 9 we're talking about word embedding, which is mainly about how to convert word into vectors. And then last week we're going through n-gram language models, which we talk a little bit more about what is going on between sequence of words. And this week we're also going to talk about something that is related to the sequence of words. So in the word embedding, mostly it's about the word itself and the vector that represents the word. Well, in a sense, a good vector should have also be derived from the relation between a word and its neighbors, but it's not really about the sequence of the words. Last week, the n-gram language model is clearly about the sequence of the words because when you want to predict a word that appears at a position, it is related to the previous word in bigram or in the previous two words in trigram and so on. Now, this topic part-of-speech tagging, it also has some relation with the sequence of words. So we're going to look at the sequence or the order of the words. Now, when I have introduced these tools in this course, you might ask like, so when are you going to use a certain tool on a certain problems? Actually, I have shown some applications on each of the presentation, but sometimes it really depends on what's your purpose in analyzing the text that you have. So I hope that by introducing these tools to you, you know that when you face a certain type of problems or you have a certain objective to do with your text, you have an idea or you have you have an idea that, oh, maybe I can use that to achieve that objective. Okay, so I'm not really going to say that this tool should be used for that particular purpose. Some are obvious, but sometimes it really also depends on what you're going to do. Okay, so let's start with this topic of this week, which is, I think it's one of the important topic in the area of text mining or natural language processing. It is called part-of-speech tagging. Let's start by talking what is part-of-speech. Well, part-of-speech is a word class, or you can think of it as a category of a word. For example, you categorize the words into noun, verb, pronoun, preposition, and so on. But then, are these the only categories? Well, the answer is no, because you may divide these categories further into much more specific categories. For example, you may want to divide noun into these more specific categories. So here you have common noun, possessive singular common noun, singular proper noun. So common noun is the object that does not have a name for itself. So for example, the world, the door, time, and so on is common noun. Proper noun, on the other hand, is something that has a name for itself, like England is a proper noun, Rachel is a proper noun, Congress is a proper noun. So common noun and proper noun is an object with kind of specific name attached to it, like England is England. But common noun, a country can be any country in the world. And then possessive singular common noun is that it is singular, but then it is singular, it is common noun, and it indicates the possessive, like fathers, cities, goats, and so on. So you see here that the classes of a word can be quite general, can be as specific as you want it to be. But these all are called part of speech. The list of parts of speech is called a text set. So here I show you an example of a pen tree bank part of speech text. So you can see here, I think it has 45 possible tags for the PartofSpeech. And for example, you can see that the noun category is not just noun, but it is quite more specific than that. Whether the noun is a mass or common noun, whether it is proper noun, whether it is singular, or whether it is plural. And then this is just one of the many text sets that are possible. So this pantry bank text sets has 45 tags. The other text sets may be less or maybe more. Maybe one text set has only 8 tags to it. The other text sets have like 88. So 88 tags. It is also possible. So it really depends on how specific you want the text of the PartofSpeech to be. Which one is correct and which one is wrong? Well, we cannot really say that because it's really about how specific you want the tag to be. PartofSpeech is important for language processing because it gives a large amount of information about a word and its neighbors. How can we use this kind of information about the word itself and the neighbors? Well, for example, it helps in word sense disambiguation. If you recall that a word can have more than one senses. So senses means it is the same word, but then it has different meanings. Let's see an example here. So if we have a word my, which is a possessive pronoun, most likely it will be followed by a noun. However, if you have the word I, which is a personal pronoun, most likely it will be followed by a verb. Then let's say you see the word duck. If it follows the word my, then you might think or infer that this word duck must be a noun. So it is the animal duck. But then if it follows the word I, then the word duck is not the animal. It is the action of ducking or avoiding, like when there's a football or soccer ball coming through you, and then you duck to avoid being hit by that ball. So by knowing that what is the previous word, you may know that although the word is the same, duck, you may know that in this context, the word duck is a noun, but in the other context, the word duck is an action because it's a verb. Okay, so when you know the PartofSpeech, it helps you to disambiguate the word that have more than one senses. PartofSpeech is also useful to extract certain types of information. For example, when I did my research, I tried to extract the product features and the corresponding sentiment from customer reviews automatically. I use this PartofSpeech information. So I detect the product features are the nouns in the reviews, and then the sentiment are the adjectives in the reviews. Of course, after this detection, I need to do some filtering to filter out all the irrelevant terms, but then this is the very first step that I find it useful. And then if you're interested to read my paper about it, take a look at this paper. Okay, so I'm using word embedding to identify the relation between customer reviews and sales rank. And then in one of the steps, I use the PartofSpeech information. So you see that I use PartofSpeech, and then I use also word embedding, and then sentiment analysis. Okay, PartofSpeech is also useful if you want to build a speech recognition model or speech generation. It means that when you want to create speech that sounds normal or correct for the speakers of that language, you need to really pay attention to where the emphasis in a word happens. So here the example is the word object. If it is a noun, the emphasis is at the beginning, object. And then if it is a verb, like your object or something, you emphasize the end of this word, object. I'm not really a native English speaker, so actually sometimes I have a kind of a hard time to hear this kind of things like, really? Is there a difference? But okay, probably there's a difference. But yeah, and then by knowing the part of speech, if you know whether it is a noun or it is a verb, you may generate a speech that sounds more natural. You may also recognize the speech, the word that is spoken in the speech, like is the person talking about an object, or is the person talking about the action of objecting of something. Now, although the number of tags in the tag sets can vary a lot, so some tag sets have only small number of tags, the other tag sets have a very large number of tags, such that the tags there are very specific for the part of speech. But then generally we can divide the part of speech into two big classes. The first class is called the closed classes. These classes have relatively fixed memberships. For examples, in prepositions, you have in, on, at, by, to, and so on, but you rarely have or almost never have a new preposition suddenly coming, suddenly introduced, or suddenly trending, like, hey, this is a new preposition. No, that doesn't happen, or very rarely. But then in the open classes, you continuously have new words added to these classes. For example, Google is now, I think it's kind of a common word as a verb. You can say, you can just Google it and it's a verb. And then it's a verb that might not be, I'm sure it's not a verb like 20 or 25 years ago. When you say it at that time, when you say it, you can just Google it and then people will be like, what you're talking about. Because Google was not a verb by then, but then you see it becomes a verb nowadays. Or we can also borrow words from the other languages to become a noun. For example, coffee is, interestingly, it's borrowed from some other language. So verb and noun, they are open classes, verb and noun, because we have a lot of new verbs, new nouns coming into the vocabulary. Okay, so let's see where coffee comes from. So coffee, the word, and the drink is believed to start from Yemen. It's a country in the south of Saudi Arabia. And then the original word is kahwa. I'm not sure that that was the correct pronunciation because I don't speak Arabic, so please forgive me if that's not the correct pronunciation. And then from Yemen, it is believed that the drink travels up to Turkey, becomes kahve, sounds already similar to coffee if I pronounce it correctly. And then from Turkey, it is introduced to Italy and the word becomes cafe. And then finally it reaches the UK and then people there name it coffee. So you see that the noun, the word coffee as a noun is borrowed from the other language, and then along with the drink it is introduced to the vocabulary. So these are the parts of speech that are in the closed classes, along with some examples of each part of speech here. Let's look at the open classes. So nouns are characterized by They may occur with determiners, like a goat, the bandwidth. They may take possessives, IBMs, and some may occur in plural form, like goats. For verb, these words refer to actions and processes. For example, like draw, provide, defer. Adjectives, they describe properties or qualities. For example, the one on the left is sweet, the one on the right is bitter. So sweet and bitter are adjectives. Finally, adverbs are the words that modify something. It's quite hard to explain what adverbs are, because if you look at this sentence, the words in italic are all adverbs. Actually, home, extremely, quickly, and yesterday. So part-of-speech tagging is a process of assigning a part-of-speech marker or tag to each word in an input text. So the input of this process is that we are given a sequence of words. We are also given a text set. The output that we must provide after this process is a sequence of tags. So what is the part of speech for each word in the sequence? So let's say we are given a sequence of words. There are 70 children there. And then we are given a text set. For example, I show part of the pantry bank text set here. And then our task in part-of-speech tagging is to tag the word there are 70 children there. So here the correct tags are, the first there is an existential there. See that it is possible that there can also be an adverb, but in the sentence, the first there is an existential there, and then the last there is an adverb. And then are is a verb for non-third singular person present. And then 70 is a cardinal number. Children is noun and it is plural. So that's an example of the result of part-of-speech tagging process. We have just seen this in the previous slide, that part-of-speech tagging is not really an easy task to do. It is not very straightforward because part-of-speech tagging and generally language, it's kind of ambiguous sometimes. It means that a word may have more than one possible part of speech. In English, for example, you can say book that flight. It means that book here is an activity, is a verb. But when you say hand me that book, book here is a noun. So you see that this word can have, the word book, may have more than one possible part of speech. And to know which part of speech that is correct for the word in that sentence, we have to see the context, the other words in that sequence. So how common is that the words that we see in a text or documents may have more than one possible part of speech? Actually, it's quite common. About 55 to 67% of words in a running text are ambiguous. Ambiguous means, again, it can have more than one possible part of speech. So it's not a really easy task to do. So you can also think about part of speech tagging as a task to resolve the ambiguity by choosing the most proper tag for the given context. So there are some approaches that can be done for part-of-speech tagging. For example, you may create rules to tag a word. For example, if you say, if the previous word is tagged by verb, and then the next word is tagged by something, and then this word at this position must be that. Or you can create just any rules that is based on your observations, or you ask linguistic experts. But in the next presentation, I'm not going to talk about those rule-based tagging. Instead, I'm going to talk how we can use something called hidden Markov model for part-of-speech tagging. So this is the end of the first part, and in the second part, I will talk about this hidden Markov model for part-of-speech tagging. Thank you.